all of what I described so far leads to this big change, which is what we call partial IFC editing. So the idea is that IFCs represent a huge amount of data, and that data set is only set to grow. People have this misconception that you have to process the entire IFC file and it becomes very big and cumbersome to work with. But this approach, what it allows you to do is only edit parts of the IFC file. So for example, let's say this were a huge model. So let's just start again from scratch. And I'm going to import that model, but let's say it's ridiculously huge. And let's say I only want to do an environmental simulate or just like a basic massing model. So I'm only after the walls and the slab objects. So we'll press import. So now I have only walls and slabs. I got nothing else. So that import was faster than the previous one, by the way, but it's hard to notice. And now I can just edit those files and save those out back to the original IFC. And all of the remaining objects that I didn't import have not been damaged in any way. They're still there. So that allows people to edit only portions of an IFC. And BlenderBIM keeps track of who's edited what. And this is unfortunately, there isn't a pretty interface built for this yet, so I'll show you the scary developer interface. But for example, let's say I'm editing this wall and I change the name from this ridiculous thing to, fancy wall, to another ridiculous thing. Now I can see that this wall actually has
a name,
been modified. It's been modified by a particular person and this particular application. So it keeps track of who's modified what. Whereas this wall, you can see that there's no change being made. So this might seem not too crazy useful for users just yet, but I think developers might see a lot of potential with this. And one of the things it will allow us to do is to have multiple users editing portions of IFCs simultaneously across different applications in a sort of multi-user collaboration environment. So that will come, not yet, but that's one of the things that this type of partial editing enables. And hopefully it also helps people question that IFC is not this huge monolithic thing. It actually is quite delineated. So you can edit just attributes without touching anything else, or just construction type.
Let me ask you something. So let's say that, for example, you are working in another application, right? In another, like Revit, and you want to fix some things that you cannot fix in Revit. Can you take it a small part of it in BlenderBIM, fix what you want to fix from IFC perspective to export it, right? And merge it back in Revit? Would that make any sense?
Yes, correct. You absolutely could. I mean, Revit couldn't import it probably without a lot of data loss because of the first issue we talked about. But what you could do is that you could take something exported out of Revit and use Blender just to modify a portion of it that you know needs fixing up for whatever reason, and then save that back out. And then it now has a full history that actually this is 100%. This is a 99% Revit file, except for this 1%, which was modified by this application.
And let's say like you don't go back to Revit, but you can you use only that modified part with the other part of that comes from Revit in another application where you put together the entire model, for example, like Solibre that is reading an IFC files, right? Could you do that? Would you see the changes in this kind of softwares, or?
Actually, I think you're thinking that this splits up the file into the big chunk and then the little bit that you extract out. But it's not actually extracting it out.
No, it's the same file.
It's still part of the big file.
Okay.
It's the same thing. Yeah, it's just modifying a portion of it.
But if you have the file originating from two different sources, you have the original file from Revit, right?
Yep.
And you cannot update it in Revit. You do it in BlenderBIM.
Well, if you wanted to update it in Revit, you would have to modify your native Revit element or whatever setting.
Yeah.
Then you would need to do a full export process all over again, and that would process everything and all of the stuff that comes with that. Whereas with this approach, you could take the existing export, bring it into BlenderBIM, or just bring a portion of it into BlenderBIM, tweak it, and then save out the fully changed file. It's not two files; it's still one file that's changed.
Yeah. Okay. I understand, but then from Revit, would be possible to export only part of the file to put everything together, so you don't have the same elements overlapping when you put everything together.
In theory, you could do that. In theory, however, that relies on applications properly implementing things like tracking who changed what, or whether it's or having consistent IDs on particular types of objects or relationships. Unfortunately, I don't think that's currently possible with Revit, but with another application, absolutely, that's probably something we should definitely do a session on next time when we have a technical demo.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm thinking, like, from an ideal workflow perspective, what would be the best workflow? So because BlenderBIM does all these things so well, would be good, like, to do everything you can do. Like if you're using Revit, like let's say you use at work, you have no choice. You will use Revit, and to do all this stuff related to IFC, to just do it in BlenderBIM would make more sense. Or will you just use BlenderBIM to audit? You do everything in Revit, whatever you can, the maximum you can do, you export it and use BlenderBIM to audit the IFC file, and after that to fix everything you need to fix, and use it after that for multidisciplinary or federated models.
What was the question? I didn't quite get that.
Regarding the workflow, what would be the best workflow? Like, how would you do it if you need to use Revit or Tekla or Alplan or ArchiCAD?
Well, if you need to use it, then you don't have a choice, right? You have to create your IFC from your native app.
Yes, I mean, how do you take both things from both worlds? How do you take the best from BlenderBIM with the best from these tools to make it to the most streamlined workflow?
I think you change things in your proprietary application, change things which are easy to change to get the IFC as a base state as good as possible. And then the things which are too tricky to change or simply cannot be changed, then you'll resort to BlenderBIM. So I guess it's a bit like, when people do photo editing, right? Yeah. You always try to get the best base photo you can with your camera, and then later on you bring it into your editing tool and you add decoration on top.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But I could be wrong. That's just me. Maybe somebody else, has a cool thing, and if you do, share it.
Yeah,
let's work it out.
Share it, of course.